In lieu of a gavel, I'll use my knuckles. Hopefully everyone can hear. We'll call this meeting to order. Thank you all for being here, particularly in such inclement weather. Thank you, Minister. This is your first time appearing before this committee. I'm sure it won't be the last, so welcome. Colleagues, originally I had thought that we could ask the Minister if he could dispense with his opening remarks and go straight to questions. However, my understanding is, Minister, you don't have any prepared remarks, but you do have an opening statement. So in that case, we'll go forward with the traditional 10-minute opening statement followed by questions. And with that, Minister, I'm sure you know the drill at committees by now. So if you would care to open the meeting by your opening statement, perhaps right after you introduce your officials at the head table with you, and then you can proceed.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et je suis très heureux de pouvoir effectivement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm quite pleased to be here with you and to be able to get started because I have so many things to tell you. So first, I'd like to thank the committee for inviting me here to discuss the supplementary estimates B. And as you said, this is the first time I have the opportunity to appear before your committee, and I'm quite honored for this opportunity. I am here with some very knowledgeable officials who are supported by excellent people at the Treasury Board Secretariat. At my left, Glenn Purves, Assistant Secretary, Expenditures Management Sector. To my right, Karen Cahill, Assistant Secretary and Chief Financial Officer. And a little bit further to my left, Ms. Marcia Santiago, Executive Director, Expenditure Strategies and Estimates. And as I'm sure you can tell, these three people will make sure they answer all of your questions, your relevant questions on this very important issue, which is the effective and rigorous management of the Canadian government's expenditures.
We're about to speak describe a total of $5.6 billion in planned budgetary spending. Of this amount, I would remind you that $1.8 billion is already authorized to what we call existing legislation. And thus, with these supplementary estimates, the government seeks authority for $3.8 billion in additional voted spending. These new expenditure spending plans will ensure the government continues to deliver on its commitments to Canadians in a number of important areas. These include significant investments in A, advancing reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, B, in supporting the dedicated men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces, and C, in working with our partners across Canada to address climate change. Conformément à l'engagement que nous avons.
In accordance with our commitment in our 2019 budget, there is funding totaling $919 million for Crown and Indigenous relations and Northern affairs, for dealing with the various settlements required, as well as the loans to ensure that the Indigenous peoples of Canada and the First Nations have the resources they need to participate fully in the various processes. They are modern treaties, as we call them. They are so important in the nations, and the process has been much more difficult than we first expected. These loans have become a heavy burden for too many communities. There are tens of millions of dollars that are owed by small communities. This is a significant obstacle to the development and social and economic developments. And there are many that have therefore loans that were cancelled, and those communities who have provided money will be reimbursed.
$3 million will be allocated to Indigenous Services Canada. These funds are required to support ongoing efforts to meet the critical need to improve Indigenous child and family services, however absolutely essential, including expanding prevention and early intervention programs. As I am certain this committee will agree, the transformation of these services is absolutely crucial to reconciliation and self-determination, that is, to righting past wrongs and moving in the right way. It is even more critical to a new generation of Indigenous children when we remember that less than 8% of Canadian children under 14 are Indigenous, Yet, these Indigenous children account for more than 52% of children in foster care in private homes. An additional $232 million to Indigenous Services Canada will provide for the ongoing implementation of Jordan's Principle. These funds will help ensure that Indigenous children across Canada have access to the same specialized health, education, and social service supports as any other children in this country. Et lorsque nous parlons d'attente, Monsieur
Speaking of expectations, Canadians clearly indicated on a number of occasions that they expect that all orders of government take solid measures to fight climate change. The detailed spending plans in this, in these estimates show that there's a $109 million to help small and medium businesses, municipalities, universities, hospitals, and schools implement their carbon reduction strategies and also improve their energy efficiency. And as all members of the committee surely know, the Encouragement Fund and the Promotion Fund for Climate is funded by the revenues from the carbon pricing. In this budget also includes a contribution of $950 million to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, which is the double of its capitalization of its Green Municipal Fund to promote local, ecological, and green innovations across the country. In addition, there have been $862 million provided to support more than 1,310 initiatives, sustainability initiatives throughout the country, while preserving every dollar invested by the government. This new investment will allow for new funding to be provided for housing, because we know how much of an important issue that is, the affordability, economic development, and fighting the emission of pollution, as well as improving the efficiency of communities.
Canadians also expect that Canada's armed forces will be there when they are needed to protect the safety and security of Canadians here at home and abroad, and to contribute to global security and partners in joint missions abroad. That is the aim of the Government of Canada's defense policy: strong, secure, engaged. To ensure our armed forces are equipped to meet these expectations and these needs, the estimates we have in front of us include a planned allocation of almost $500 million to the Department of National Defense. These funds will be investment in the equipment, infrastructure, and information technology systems that are absolutely essential to the operation and maintenance of a modern armed service. A further $128.5 million will support current overseas operations. And to be more precise, that will include the ongoing land force deployment in Latvia as part of NATO's deterrence mission in Central and Eastern Europe, and in Africa, where members of the Royal Canadian Air Force are currently providing tactical airlift support to UN peacekeeping operations from their base in Uganda. In terms of highlights of these estimates, Mr. Chair, I would also mention one other substantial item, that being $138 million to the Office of Infrastructure of Canada. The largest part of this amount, $106 million, relates to the completion of the Champlain Bridge Corridor project in Montreal, which, many of us know, is a vital transportation link for more than 60 million vehicles each year. En conclusion, Monsieur le Président, dans le temps...
In conclusion, in the time I'm allotted, I can only give you but a brief overview of the important points in the estimates, the supplementary estimates, and the documents to which you have access give all parliamentarians and all Canadians the possibility to help the Canadian government in carrying out its duties in a responsible way in allocating Canadian funds in to important issues for all Canadians across the country. In accordance with our commitment to Canadians to be transparent, to meet the expectations of Canadians and parliamentarians, I'd like to indicate that substantial additional information is available online. In fact, they are not only available online, they're also made available in an increasingly accessible format to all Canadians so that Canadians and parliamentarians can understand what we are investing for our families, our children, our seniors, our armed forces, our infrastructures, and of course, for the Indigenous peoples.
Examination of these estimates by parliamentarians, of whom you are distinguished representatives today, and to any questions they may have, you may have, as we work together to invest in meeting the priorities, the needs, and the expectations of Canadians. Merci, Monsieur le Président. I would now be happy to take any questions the committee may have.
Thank you very much. And starting with committees, we'll go to Mr. McCauley for 6 minutes.
Minister, thanks very much for joining us today. And Mr. Purvis, Ms. Santiago, Ms. Cahill, welcome back. I hope you have a good reign as President of Treasury Board, and we look forward to you working with us to bring much better transparency and oversight to our spending process. And speaking of the transparency, I want to just chat with you about the Vote 10. Now, traditionally, the Treasury Board Vote 10 has been about $3 million a year, up until the last 2 years where it jumped to well over $250 million per year, 368 and I think $371 million. Now, of course, that's on top of the $7 billion Vote 40 slush fund and the extra $5 billion in the Table A to 11 slush fund from last year. Now, I want to read right from your webpage. It says, Vote 10 is subject to the approval of Treasury Board to supplement other appropriations in support of the implementation of strategic, and I want to emphasize that word, strategic management initiatives in the public service of Canada. So I want to grasp how we have this need for go from $3 million, up to well over $250 million. And the example I'm going to use in the estimates this year, we've got $3.5 million for CRA out of the Vote 10. Now, CRA, it's on a 2-year cycle. Last year, they lapsed $180 million. So I'm trying to figure out, for a short-term project, why the need for $3.5 million out of the Vote 10 for something that's not strategic for a department that is lapsing the money. So they can't even spend the money that they have approved, and yet we have to fall back onto the Vote 10 money that's pushed in there.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. First, to provide
and feel free to blame Minister Bryson for that as well.
No, I would never blame Minister Bryson because first he is such a nice person and professional member of Parliament that you have had the opportunity to know for better and for longer than I did. Unfortunately, I only came here in 2015, so missed much of his career.
But to the Vote 10, please.
Yes, so I'll not get that. So as you will know, as an experienced member of Parliament, these votes are central votes, and Vote 10 in particular is for whole of government initiatives, which are, of course, a challenge for the efficiency and the equity of government expenditures because they involve many departments. But they are there to facilitate and to coordinate the important investments that these separate agencies and departments need to implement. So they vary from year to year because, of course,
I'm going to interrupt you for 2 seconds. It doesn't vary from year to year. It sits at around 3 million. I'll tell you, 3 million, 3 million, 2 million, 3 million, 3 million, 2 million. Then it goes up to 368. So it doesn't vary from year to year. It sits at around 3 million. Last couple of years, it's gone way out. We have had an issue in the past with the Vote 40 and the money from the A211 from the budget, lacking oversight. The PBO has been critical of this. Previous PBO before that, takes away transparency from Canadians and the ability of parliamentarians to do their jobs as oversight of the spending. So we have all of a sudden $370 million in the Vote 10, and it's used for a non-strategic purpose. And why? And will we see an end to this practice with you as the President of the Treasury Board?
So three different things. First, as we were saying, these central votes exist to make sure that Canadians get the best impact out of the investments made by the government. And as I said, vote 10 in particular is there to facilitate that in the situation of a complex environment. B, what is
But you're
certainly
not
the case
using
is
the
that
vote 10 for that. You're using it in this specific example for money for CRA that lapses hundreds of millions of dollars. So I understand what you're trying to say and what the purpose is, but it's not being used for that purpose. So I'm asking, will we go back? Will we see you as president go back to what has been traditionally over the last 10, 15 years used for its specific purpose and not a balloon amount used for as a slush fund or for to cover other departments that cannot get their act together, for lack of better word? But myself, I'm sure my colleagues around the table, we've been very vocal. We want to see transparency and we want to see the proper plans for this money before it goes out the door. $3.5 million for a department that cannot get its act together and lapse hundreds of millions doesn't need money from a strategic cross-government fund. So I'll ask you again, will we see a reduction to traditional levels and an increase in transparency for this?
So what we certainly will see and need to see, as you are correctly stating, is as much transparency as parliamentarians need and deserve. And in that context, parliamentarians will want and need to understand the evolution of these expenditures from year to year. We all understand that it can vary according to the specific challenges that our country is facing. In that context, however, I would want to highlight again that both the Parliamentary Budget Officer, other institutions and agencies across the government, and you, as important parliamentarians, will want to provide your own input and formulate your own questions.
Just very quickly, I'll advise you, one of the problems with the vote 10, there's no legally binding control over that. Once the money is approved, it can be spread anywhere it wants. That's one of the problems we have. I think we'll express to you, probably concerning the opposition, we'd like to see an end to the vote 10 being used as a slush fund. And I would probably expect if it's presented as a mains with 200, 300, 400 million, as the government's tried to do in the last 2 years, that this committee will vote it down and reduce it as we are able to.
You'll have to unfortunately wait for your answer, if there is one, Minister, because we're completely out of time. We're going to go now to 6 minutes for Mr. Drouin.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Minister, to our committee. We wish you all of the success you can have in the future, and we are looking forward to working with you. And if this committee can help inform your decisions in the future, that would be great. One of the things that the committees had done in the past was look at the issue of how the supplementary estimates align with the budget or the main estimates. So that's something that we started a couple of years ago. And I have a question. Why put an end to the pilot project this year? Thank you very much, Francis. And of course, I'd like to once again congratulate you for your excellent work. The key words here are efficiency and transparency. As we all know, there's a problem that goes all the way back to Confederation, I believe, and that is a problem of aligning the budgetary process and the estimates process. There is a gap between in the information rather that is available when it's time to study the estimates and then prepare the budget, as the Minister of Finance has noted. This gap has been looked at over the past few years. Among other things, this pilot project was to help with that. And we have some lessons learned. And in parallel to that, we have put in place significant measures to improve efficiency, effectiveness, and transparency. There's a new initiative on results that was put forward in 2017 to increase transparency and a better ability for parliamentarians to understand the two different ways of doing things. So the various accounting ways, accrual accounting and cash accounting, which are two different systems used by the two different cycles. So we also, as you know, put in place something called InfoBase GC. It's extraordinary. I encourage you to go look through it. It makes more transparent and more accessible all of the data on the expenditures, also the impacts in terms of resource management across the Canadian government. Along with that, we have frameworks for planning for results from the departments. And just yesterday, I tabled the departmental results frameworks for 87 departments. Now, in terms of the lessons learned, we know that Vote 40 was subject to some scrutiny, and there were divided opinions even among academics. What was done to ensure transparency and accountability? I mean, how did we ensure transparency and the responsibility of parliamentarians on Vote 40? And it wasn't used in 2019. So was that the lesson that was learned in 2019? Thank you for these very relevant and well-informed questions. As you know, during the first year of the pilot project, Vote 40 was used to increase the speed with which members of the committee and parliamentarians were able to look at how to reconcile these two different systems. And there's also a reconciliation board that we can look at and that we reference every time that we table a budget. That increases parliamentarians' ability to obtain information in a transparent manner. During the second year, Vote 40 was done away with following recommendations from the parliamentarians. This was excellent, and this meant that we were able to reconcile the budget from the Minister of Finance and the budgetary cycle, and we now await guidance from parliamentarians. There are lots of things that we've done in the past that we're quite proud. The reconciliation table, InfoBase, and more accessible information in more accessible formats for all Canadians, and we're counting on you to help us achieve this work. Thank you very much for this response. Now, quickly, we know that in your mandate letter from the Prime Minister, he asked you to modernize the framework, the fiscal framework, and also improve the fiscal burden. Could you tell me more about this?
Limited amount of time.
How much time do I have?
We'll have 20 seconds.
Oh, donc, deux choses rapides. Hier,
Two things very quickly. Yesterday, I met with the Chamber of Commerce of Canada exactly on this point to explain what we are doing right now, what we're continuing to do with them. That's an external committee, a new policy on regulations. And we have more solid discussions with the provinces, the U.S., Europe, and we have targeted reviews of regulations with plans that are being implemented with the support of the Chamber of Commerce and other essential partners across the country. And also there will be a new regulations body put in place. There's so much more I could say, but we don't have much time.
I realize time is precious. Madame Vignola, please, 6 minutes.
Bonjour, Monsieur Duclos. Merci d'être.
Thank you for being here with us, Minister. I'd like to come back to Vote 10. If I understood correctly, Vote 10 is something that's new. Usually it's used in a horizontal manner that the money can be spread on to a number of departments. Now, from what I can see, there's one department that mainly got this money, and what explains this concentration of the funds? As you very clearly pointed out, Ms. Vignola, it's a central vote. It's one of the central votes. And Vote 10 allows a number of different agencies, for example, the Canada Revenue Agencies, to work with other departments and agencies to share initiatives and manage initiatives in the most effective and efficient way, especially for initiatives whose costs are spread across the government, across different departments. It's a vote that has been in existence for a long time, that is used as transparently as possible. You have the right and the responsibility to request and to obtain all the information that is relevant to the usage of these funds. That being said, as with very many other votes and initiatives, there are changes to these numbers based on priorities of the government and of Canadians over the years. It's the same thing with other investments. Often, the changes in the numbers are not linear. They really follow and represent the different priorities of Canadians and the government. Well, I didn't quite get an answer to my question, which was, why is the money concentrated mainly in one department rather than being spread across the various departments, as you stated? I could give the floor to Glenn because he knows the details much better than I do, but it's not quite right to say that the money is concentrated on only one agency over the past over 100 years of a confederation. This vote has been used in a number of ways, and it will continue to be used because it's up to the Canadian government. It's the responsibility of the Canadian government to adjust itself to the priorities of Canadians. Glenn, if you'd like to say more. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
As the President mentioned, the vote has existed in the toolkit for many years as a central vote to provide for government-wide initiatives. So it all depends on which initiatives are coming forward. So if you look at what's been supported, Indigenous early learning and childcare, in this case, there's application modernization initiative that Mr. Macaulay mentioned. There's support for Phoenix damages that have been identified. These are instances where Treasury Board authority is given for supporting the initiative where we don't know exactly which vote it's going to end up in, because it's a lot of times it's demand driven. A lot of times there's a payment or a partial payment that's required before the next appropriation act is set out. And so transparency is provided just like any other initiative, so that parliamentarians can ask the questions they wish in order to get more information. As items are allocated from that vote, it is reported online as we table the next estimate document. So in this case, Mr. Macaulay mentioned, I think, $3 to $4 million for the application modernization initiative. The other thing, just to point out on that question, is that initiative, there's many departments involved in that initiative. And when authorities are provided for new funding, they're given to those departments, irrespective of at a point in time where they are in a certain lapse forecast. Because lapse forecasts change all the time. And so it would be inappropriate for a government or a parliament to keep approving funds with inappropriate information on where the financial situation of a government is. We have the fiscal monitor that provides information on an ongoing basis. We have loads of financial reporting that provides this information. So it is simply one of many departments in that initiative.
OK. J'ai encore une minute?
Do I still have a minute? Okay. So if I've understood correctly, when we look at vote 10 and we're voting on it, we're voting on a credit margin, and then we can't really examine it again depending on the emergencies that come up, and that's $300 million. Well, the central votes framework is for the whole of government, and it's based on the need to react quickly to crises or to financial demands that cannot be foreseen. For example, it's important for the Canadian government to have transparent use of resources, but also effective use of resources to respond to the needs of Canadians. So this central vote exists for that purpose, to ensure that Canadians can get the support they need during emergencies and crises situations. Sometimes there's coordination required across the government.
Minister, once again, I apologize, but we do have to try and make sure that all parliamentarians have adequate and equal time for questions. Mr. Green, you're up for 6 minutes.
Work through this hopefully expeditiously, Mr. Chair, through you. You have referenced in your mandate letter the implementation, the recent passing of the Pay Equity Act to the public service. My question is, when can our public service sector workers expect to be paid out, and how far back retroactively will they be paid?
This is an excellent question, which you will want also to take up with the Minister of Employment, who would be most happy to provide the details that you are entitled to receive. We are very proud of this law that was passed in 2018. We know that a fair Canada...
Just to be clear through you, Mr. Chair, so that am I to expect the answer from the other minister, or... Because I do have 2 or 3 more questions, and I just want to make sure I have...
Well, I can provide you with the broad guidance given the short time, but if you're interested in the important details, then I would expect that you would also be in touch with my colleague.
Okay. So as it relates also to your reference letter, it talks about accelerating and building on the progress you've made with First Nations. I'm to understand that there are still many First Nations land claims that have been settled but not yet paid out. So my question through you, Mr. Chair, to the Honourable Minister is how many settled land claims are there in line that have been settled but not yet paid out? And when can those First Nations band councils expect to be compensated and made whole on those agreements?
As we know, as we feel these days, the process of reconciliation is key not only for the short-term well-being of Indigenous Canadians and indeed every Canadian and all Canadians, but also for the longer-term success of our country. So this involves, as you correctly say, the negotiation and the signing of modern treaties to make sure that Indigenous rights are not only recognized but also implemented. And that's a process which is going to take a long time.
So if these have already been settled, through you, Mr. Chair, respectfully, if they've been settled, I would anticipate that there'd be an answer as to when the First Nations communities that have signed these modern treaties, it's an agreement, it's contracted, I don't think it takes, philosophical pontification, but I just want to know how many outstanding land claims are there for First Nations under your modern treaties, and when will they be paid out?
So as you are correctly asking, we absolutely need for the short-term and long-term success of this country to move forward on this process of signing modern treaties. B, we need to do this respectfully with Indigenous communities and nations and peoples across Canada. That involves, in many cases, making those payments in the most appropriate manner. Even with my previous job as Minister of Family, Children and Social Development, I knew and I have learned that repeatedly, that you do this not only quickly, but respectfully and efficiently with Indigenous people.
I will accept that as the time frame, as both... we have 3 minutes left. I have 2 more questions. Thank you for bearing with me. The next question is, as it relates to the funding and strengthening of environmental protections and addressing the concerns raised by Indigenous groups regarding the Trans Mountain Expansion Project, how many fish populations and habitats are impacted by the Trans Mountain Expansion Project?
Well, two things on that. The first thing, which you will probably know, but which is, I think, important to remind ourselves of, this is a project which has been deemed of national interest and national benefit. It has followed all the important steps that such a project needs to go through. And B, as you will want to do, if you are interested in the details of the process and not the budgetary impact of that process, then you will want to, and you deserve to, ask questions and receive answers from the appropriate my colleagues on that file.
Okay. I see that there's also a request for $487 $0.3 million in funding for votes 1B and 5B regarding capital investments in defense, physical infrastructure, information management, and technology systems. Can you provide any additional detail on the type of information management and technology systems that would be purchased with requested funds?
That's an excellent question too. So while I provide a high-level answer, my colleague Glenn will probably want to add more specific details. So the Vote 5, as you have noted, is for contingencies. So for, again, ways and means to react to unexpected and unpredictable interventions and actions by the federal government, and they involve a number of different sorts of actions. And perhaps, Glenn, you would like to,
Sure.
to provide a few more details.
Sure, I'll be quick, Mr. Green. Just on your question. So, the funding is effectively a broad range of capital investments and defense capabilities, including about 277 previously planned projects and an additional 52 new projects. The funds requested in the supplementary estimates, which you cited, represent a combination of reprofiled funding, which is quite typical of large capital projects over several years, as well as some new funding to start new projects or phases of projects. And we'd be happy to refer you to your request a list of specific projects related to the equipment, the IT systems, and so forth to our colleagues at Defense.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madame Bloch, we are into our second round. You have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I do want to thank the Minister and our departmental officials for joining us today as we study the estimates. I want to pick up on some of the questioning that was happening around Vote 40. And I'm new on the committee, although I did sit on the committee about a decade ago, and just want to highlight that the PBO was very critical of Vote 40 when it was brought in. In fact, he said what the public should be worried about is the government introduced that new TB Vote 40 to speed up the implementation of budget measures, and it hasn't achieved that. In fact, it's slower than it was before. He went on to say, we should have seen a significant change in the speed at which budget measures get implemented. This suggests at least that Vote 40 is not that useful to speed up the implementation of budget measures. And I'm imagining that perhaps that is why it was abandoned. It wasn't actually accomplishing the goal that it was established for. So my question is this: what is the process now for the programs that are still waiting for approval under Vote 40 in 2018 and the budget implementation votes in 2019?
Thank you, Kelly, and welcome to the committee too. I'm, however, intimidated by the fact that you've been around for those many years, and I'll try to be up to the standards and the expectations. Now, more quickly, perhaps, on Vote 40. Vote 40 was used in the first year of the pilot project. It led to a greater speed, greater transparency, greater connectivity between the budget process and the budget, the supplementary and main estimates process. Now, parliamentarians rightly raised and provided advice on how that process and that pilot project could be improved. So the committee in particular did its job and advised that Vote 40 might not be the best way to reconcile these two processes. So the next year, the second year of the pilot project, led to the use of another tool, which was not Vote 40, to reconcile better by means of more detailed ministerial level information to reconcile better the accrual and the cash processes involved. So we have learned from the pilot project, and we have learned, in fact, more quickly than having to wait until the end of the pilot project because of the important work of the committee.
Right. So I'll re-put my question so that I might get a more accurate answer to the question. I did ask what the process is now for the programs that are still waiting for approval under Vote 40 in 2018 and the budget implementation votes in 2019. Perhaps I'm making an assumption. I assume there are programs still there. Will they continue to be approved, or are they effectively dead with the pilot project?
Now, having perhaps made more clear what the pilot project involved in terms of the use of Vote 40, Vote 40 has now expired. The details of the use of Vote 40 items are available online, and you have the right and the responsibility to find out about them. We have now moved to the system that existed before the pilot project, having, however, learned from the pilot project and having in the meantime increased significantly the transparency of the estimates and budget processes.
So is it fair then to say that any programs that hadn't been completed under Vote 40, any money that had been allocated for programs under Vote 40 in 2018, that those were abandoned, that they actually weren't funded and they died with the pilot project?
As you would expect, given your long service to Canada and to Parliament in particular, these are estimates and expenditure that are revised and reviewed every year. So there are natural changes to the levels of expenditures that department in particular would receive and expect. So you would find out about the precise nature of the department's expenditures by looking at, for instance, GC Infobase and the results reports that I tabled yesterday. But I wouldn't want to claim that that every dollar planned in a particular year has been spent in that particular year, because there are natural reporting mechanisms that also exist for dollars to be spent and
Thank you very much.
efficiently.
Thank you. Mr. Komerschek, I understand that you are going to be splitting time with Mr. Weiler.
Yes.
About 2.5 minutes, sir, then go right ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, President Duclos, for being here with us today and sharing your insights and expertise. Much appreciated for your time. I'm going to be speaking about, asking you a question about an issue that is very important to Canadians, but also very important to the residents of my constituency, Windsor-Tecumseh, which is climate change and the reduction of GHG emissions. So the National Roundtable on the Environment and the Economy estimated that the cost to Canada on an annual basis by 2020 will be about $5 billion in terms of the effects of climate change. And the PBO also estimated that the financial costs of natural disasters on their own will be, of weather events, will be about $900 million per year. In the constituency of Windsor-Tecumseh, I can tell you we had 2 catastrophic floods in 2016 and 2017 that basically caused around $300 million of insurable damages, and about 6,000 homes were affected. So the question that I have to you, Minister, is how does the Treasury Board Secretariat contribute to our government's effort to lower emissions per the Canadian Framework on Clean Growth and Climate Change that was introduced in our first mandate?
Thank you, Irek, and welcome to the committee and to Parliament, and thank you for your leadership. And now, three brief things. A, it's absolutely essential to be mindful of the anxiety that Canadians feel towards the effect of climate change, and of course the impacts that these effects have on their lives. B, we have a broad set of measures, including pollution pricing, that are setting Canada on a more sustainable path and greater economic growth, and making life more affordable through pollution pricing in particular. In the supplementary estimates, to be more precise, there are a number of expenditures that are relating to carbon pricing. So $109 million for the Department of the Environment to implement the Climate Action Incentive Fund, which, as you will know, but not reserves to be repeated, gives more money in the pockets of the large majority of households in Canada than the price on pollution imposes. That's not only benefiting a large proportion, a majority of households, it also reduces poverty. It helps the more vulnerable Canadians do well and live more affordably in Canada. Now, the last thing I wanted to say is the government of Canada also needs to be a leader. And let me inform the committee that since 2005, the greenhouse gas emissions of the government of Canada has been reduced by a third. Our Paris target, as you know, is 30% between 2005 and 2030. In the federal government, we have reduced greenhouse gas emissions by more than that, by a third, and we're only in 2020, and therefore we have the ambition of getting to a lower level of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 than what we announced in the Paris Agreement.
Excellent.
Thank you very much. Mr. Weiler, your colleagues took a little bit of your time. You've got just slightly over a minute left.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll be quick here. I just want to thank as well the Honourable President of the Treasury Board for coming to join our committee today. The question I have is something of major interest in my riding of West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country, as well as throughout Western Canada. And I mean, and the question that I have is related to the Department of Western Economic Diversification is requesting $0.4 million to promote access to public transportation following Greyhound Canada's 2018 service reductions. This has created a big gap in Western Canada for interregional transportation. So I'm wondering what type of promotion activities the department is going to do with this funding, and what type of transportation options are going to be available in areas that were once served by by Greyhound Canada.
Very good, Patrick. We're very proud and pleased to have you. How much time do we have?
30 seconds.
Oh, that's that's long enough. First, to say how proud and pleased we are to have you with us, and welcome to the committee in particular. And second, thank you so much for insisting on public transportation. It's true in my city. We are investing in Quebec City, the largest investment ever made for the benefit of Quebec City in the history of Canada. And I understand from you that you want to have more details on how the Treasury Board and our investments will benefit your riding and your constituents, and I'll make sure that you get those details.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. McCauley.
Question.
We'll go now to our final round, which is 2.5 minutes each. Madame Vignola.
Monsieur Duclos.
Mr. Duclos, I noticed in the budget that there's a little bit more than 33,000 was going to be gotten rid of for student loans, and there's a reduction of 230 million or something, numbers like that for grants to students. Now, this is my question. Of those 33,000 and that $1 million, what proportion will go to Quebec? A very important question. As we know, students across the country live in very precarious situations, and we need them. We need them, and we need to invest in their human capital so that we can continue to grow the economy and the middle class. We're very aware of that. And in Quebec, we have a separate system that is separate from the Canadian system. So we made announcements that would substantially increase the quality of life and the help allotted to students, and a portion of that will be going to Quebec. And with the expectation that the Quebec government will be reinvesting it towards students, I mean, I hope that our student associations in Quebec need to know how these associations will be invested in, so we know we can count on the government of Quebec, because we know that it's even more important in Quebec. What's the proportion? Well, the exact numbers I could give to you. I actually would just give you a vague number, but you do deserve to get a specific number. So I will ask my colleagues around the table here to give you the exact numbers, not just the proportion, but the mechanisms are important as well. How these sums are transferred to the government of Quebec. Thank you. I also saw that some of the transfers were actually suddenly there was not much in 2017, 2018, and then there were millions and some billions that were put elsewhere. So now to go back, to give you an example, it's here somewhere. what's the explanation that in 2017, 2018, we saw little dots in the tables, and now we're looking at millions of dollars for 2020? Is that something that was newly created? Could you give us some explanations, please?
However, Minister, suggest that if there are any questions that are posed by my colleagues around the table during your appearance here for which you did not have time to give an adequate and thorough answer, I would ask that you please supply answers to those questions through the clerk to the respondents. Mr. Green, you've got the final 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, sir. Earlier in the line of questioning, it was quite rightly stated by Mr. Purves that it's inappropriate for Parliament to approve funds with inappropriate information of what the financial situation of the government is. And yet the Office of the Parliamentary Budget Officer stated that typically departmental results reports are tabled in Parliament in the fall of the subsequent fiscal year. However, as of the tabling of this final supplementary estimate, we've yet to receive those reports. The question I have through you is when will we be able to receive those reports, and will we receive them in advance of the votes?
They were tabled yesterday, Matthew.
Oh, they were.
And they will be online very soon.
Excellent. Thank you. That's what I got.
And just for the information, Matthew, yourself and others, normally when the departmental reports and results are tabled, they are examined at the same time of the estimates examination. So the Minister is quite right. They were tabled yesterday afternoon. Minister, thank you for appearing for the first time before our committee. I do appreciate it. I'm sure all of our committee members appreciate it. I'm sure, again, it will not be the last time we see you before this committee in months to come. Colleagues, we will suspend for just a couple of moments while the Minister leaves the table and we get prepared for our next round of witnesses. We are suspended. Colleagues, I'll call the meeting back to order. Before we begin with the testimony from our witnesses, I would just like to inform the committee that I would like to reserve the last 15 minutes of our allotted time to deal with some committee business. So that means we've got approximately 40 minutes left for our witnesses to provide testimony. We've, of course, heard the opening statement from the minister and had a number of questions to the minister. But now, Mr. Purvis, would you like to open, or do you have any kind of a prepared statement?
No, I'll suspend the prepared statement.
Thank you very much. In that
time.
case, we will go directly to questions, and we'll start. Ziad, if you want to lead us off for the first 6 minutes, please.
Good morning. Just want to take you through a journey in the IT area, and I got a few quick questions. I appreciate quick answers if that's okay. Question: how much of taxpayers' money the federal government spends on IT? Do you have any number?
Well, I can talk to you a bit about Shared Services Canada and the reference levels for Shared Services Canada in terms of its discharge and responsibilities.
Yeah, I'm looking for numbers, and if you don't have it handy.
I'm saying that we have a minister for digital who will be appearing with the team, and so it'd be.
The estimates for the purpose of this meeting, what Mr. Purvis is saying is that we have asked for the estimates on SSC, Shared Services Canada, to be discussed here. So if you can sort of focus your remarks, Mr. Purvis, on the amount of IT spending within Shared Services Canada, that could be, I think, helpful.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I'll just if you look at the sheet for Shared Services Canada in the main estimates and supplementary estimates B, which we're discussing here, for capital expenditures, they spend about $429 million per year. Now, I don't have that actually broken down by specific IT measure and capital.
That's fine. Here's my next question.
There's a certain portion of the operating that would probably go to services as well.
Here's my next question to you. That's going to help you to respond, not now, maybe later. An ordered paper question Q2456 last year from one of my colleagues, Department of Global Affairs responded by saying all departments undertake a reporting exercise mandated by Treasury Board related to the previous fiscal year IAM IT expenditures. This exercise is typically completed 6 months after the end of the previous fiscal year to allow for thorough assessment and analysis of relevant information. The question is, would you be able to provide us with a copy of these reports provided to each department for the fiscal year of 2018-19?
I think for the answer for that question, I think probably would be more appropriate for the appearance of the Minister of Digitization, who has the purview on that and who could actually speak to that issue. I'm happy to pass along that question so that there's an informed response when you have that conversation.
But I'm building on the answer from Global Affairs, right, and is mentioned that Treasury Board is responsible. So, and that fall 2018-19, which is last year. Right. Therefore, I think I still would like to ask for those reports to come from Treasury Board. So as I believe you have them.
So I'll pass to my colleague Karen Cahill here, who's the CFO of the department.
So good morning. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Although I don't have the number and we will commit to provide you the numbers, I can give you additional information. It's in fact, this information is in fact provided by all departments in the fall, around end of September, to the Office of the Chief Information Officer for Canada, which is under TBS. The information is also available on an IT portal because all departments are required to send the information to the office of the CIO via this IT portal. So, but we will definitely undertake to provide you with the information, and we're coming back, as my colleague Glenn was saying, with the Minister of Digital Government and the acting OC, Chief Information Officer, will also be present. So we will be able to provide you with the amount of spent on IMIT.
Good, thank you. I want to go back to a question that was asked by my colleague, Mr. Macaulay here, on the Vote 10. Vote 10, by definition, is basically provide grants and contributions to funding to prospectus recipients. The minister mentioned that also it's the financial demands that account for unforeseen circumstances, like emergencies and crisis situations and so on and so on. Now, CRA received $3.5 million, and the $3.5 million went to a application modernization initiative, while CRA is basically designing in-house software to provide to low-income Canadians to file their taxes. Now, we know that the private sector have ready on the shelf a product that is less expensive, that probably more advanced, and doesn't cost $3.5 million. So how can we justify from the Vote 10 definition, how can we call this as also a crisis and emergency funds to CRA to build what? To build softwares? How can we justify that to Canadian taxpayers, and how can we satisfy to answer this to public?
Unfortunately, even though it's an excellent question, we have absolutely no time. But as I mentioned with the minister, Mr. Purvis, if you can provide a written answer to that question, or if the opportunity comes up in a subsequent question.
So I would like to write to the committee on an answer on Vote 10 and the utilization of Vote 10, because I think there are some misrepresentations on the use of Vote 10. And I just would like to clarify. That
would be.
So I think the best way to do it would be to do it through writing, because there are, again, misinterpretations of Vote 10, the controls, the visibility, the authorities. It has been an instrument that has been in the toolkit for many, many years. We're demand-driven.
We're speaking off the same page, Mr. Purvis. As I said to the minister, and I say to you, that yes, any questions that have been posed that we didn't have a chance to answer verbally, I would ask that you provide those answers in writing through the clerk. And you agree to do that? I appreciate that.
Absolutely, to correct misrepresentation.
I appreciate that. Mr. Shahari, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Parviz, for your intervention being here today. Minister, in his opening remark, indicated that there's about $3.8 billion voted allocation that's going to go to reconciliation, to armed forces, and to climate change. I'd like to focus on the reconciliation. I think it was mentioned around $919 million is going to about 3 or 4 initiatives. And he quickly highlighted that I believe the $588 million for child and family services, about $230 million for First Nation children under the Jordan Principle, and another $150 million for First Nation emergency management services. So the biggest number in there is about $588 million, and it's focused on funding child and family services. As you know, we debated Motion C6 that talked about changing the oath, and we had heard that this is a symbolic move and there is no fundamental and substantive initiatives taken by the government to help the Indigenous. So given the fact that there is an investment of almost $1 billion here, can you give me a better understanding of the $588 million that's being spent on child and family services?
Sure. Thank you very much. You mentioned a few things, actually, and so I just want to make sure that there's a clear line of sight in terms of what is in the supplementary estimates to support Indigenous writ large. So you did talk about 919 million. So this is for loan forgiveness, and this was announced as part of budget, I believe, 2019. So there's been a many negotiations and since 1975, and so the government has paid and provided loans for these negotiations. And so the forgiveness, it goes back to, is a retroactive lens, going back, as well as continuous payments to support Indigenous groups who are actively engaged in comprehensive claims negotiations with the government. So that's one item. The $588 million for First Nations Child and Family Services is to improve access to the prevention and the early intervention programs and maintain the well-being and the cultural connections of First Nations children in care. So this is up and beyond existing funding that was approved in the main estimates for this purpose. This is up and beyond. This is supplemental funding, and it's largely demand-driven. And it's driven by the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal rulings and ensuring that Indigenous children receive the same care as any child. And so it's not a new policy. It's not a new initiative. It's just providing under the same current basis of support under the existing policy. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, and can you go a bit deeper of what is those type of child and family services that's being provided?
So it's provision of medical support, reimbursement for First Nations agencies that are providing such support, for provincial agencies that are providing such support, so that the standard of care is at a level that's expected through the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal ruling.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, how much time do I have?
You have 2 minutes.
Oh, great. Another $232 million was allocated for First Nation children under Jordan Principle. Can you expand on that one, please?
It provides a wide range of health and social and education services and support to First Nations children that qualify under Jordan's Principle. This, again, is up and beyond the funding that has already been provided for Jordan's Principle. So just to give you a sense, like when we tabled main estimates, budget 2019, as part of a budget implementation voting, approved $404 million to continue implementing Jordan's Principle. This is up and beyond existing funding that the department has in its reference levels. And this funding was included, again, main estimates under Vote 20 of Indigenous Services, right? Now, this is up and beyond. This is in order to address additional volume and demands and services to maintain that standard as defined under Jordan's Principle currently.
Okay. That would be it, and I see the lights are flashing. So
that's just the opening of Parliament. That's not a vote call.
Okay.
There's 40 seconds left. If Mr. Komerschuk, you want to ask a quick question?
Yeah, just a quick question. I know that the Department of Employment and Social Development Canada is requesting $180 million under Vote 90B to write off unrecoverable debts directly financed Canada student loans. What percentage of the total loans out there does this represent in terms of the write-offs?
There's a stock of about $34 billion. As I understand. And so typically what happens is from a fiscal planning standpoint, they end up putting a provision in the fiscal framework for loans. And so this is effectively the end result of non-performing loans going to CRA, seeking 6 years in order to see if they could be retrievable. And then at some point, it's just a required expense that has to be done under ESD's page proof. And so Vote 90 is used to facilitate that. There's no actual payment that goes out. It's just an expense that is to facilitate that. It's an ongoing, for years, the range has been it's
McCauley,
in the range.
You have... No, I'm sorry. Madame Vignola, my mistake. Sorry. Please, you have 6 minutes.
Merci.
Thank you. I saw that for 2019-2020, in terms of the health department, there's a decrease in the investments of about $800 million compared to what was provided for in 2017-2018. I must say that in 2017-2018, there's almost $3.5 billion, and now we're at $2.7 billion. So that's a fairly significant decrease. What explains it? All of the provinces are asking for an increase in transfers of an increase of 5.2% to their transfers. Thank you very much for your question. Please allow me to answer in English.
So I don't actually have the information to show the distinction between, you're talking about 18-19 and the reference level of 18-19 for health versus the authorities proposed to date of about 2.7 billion here. So I'd be happy to get back to you with a written response on that. Just to make sure that it's a thorough response.
Merci. Merci.
Thank you. I had questions because the provinces are asking for higher levels of transfers. So when I saw the numbers decrease from 2017-2018, I mean, it just, despite the request from the provinces that dates back several months, I mean, that's it for now for me. But I can give you another explanation.
For transfers, so for the Canada Health transfer, Canada Social transfer, equalization, and so forth, that doesn't show up here with respect to this. If you go to the main estimates, you'll see effectively, I believe for 1920, the start of the year was about 175 billion. So those large transfers are part of that structure. And we started reporting on statutory expenses because parliamentarians were asking to get a lens of when they're having to vote, they want to have the same information about stat to get a big picture of the global spend for government. Okay. So in terms of changes to transfers, it would not be reflected here because these are for voted amounts, non-statutory amounts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Merci.
Mr. Green, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm struck by, the numbers, the figures coming out of the Canada Student Loan Program write-offs. I'm sure members around this table can recall when they went to university. I know for me it's not too long ago, but if I recall, I was paying about $3,500 in tuition at Acadia at the time, and at that time it was very expensive. And I have deep concerns about the increasing financialization of post-secondary education as it relates to providing equal opportunities to everybody to be able to engage in our post-secondary education system. So, Mr. Chair, when I look at 33,098 write-offs, I have to wonder, what we're doing in terms of saddling this whole generation of students with debt. Well, we are, because if they're writing it off, you can imagine the collections process that happens for students that are having to write off this debt also has ancillary implications on their financial outlook. So even though the government's writing it off, you can imagine the pressure that's on these students. So as we look at the rising costs of every aspect of life, the financialization of education, of housing, of food, of transit, the question is put quite rightly, because this is obviously the write-off on the previous estimate, is what factors do you think account for the increased dollar value in unrecoverable debt from 2019 to 2020 in the fiscal year compared to 2018 to 2019? And if you care to comment to my colleague's comment, what are the consequences for students when they write off when this debt gets written off on their behalf?
Sure, many thanks. I think I'll open with a question, but it may be something that you may wish to also get supplementary information from ESDC on. But ultimately, as I mentioned, of a base of about 34 billion in terms of student loans. Since 1415, the government has written off.
If I could just pause right there.
Actually, if I could just finish just with this line. Since 1415, the government has written off between 164 million and 295 million per year in student loans. So this is a regular appearance in these estimates, and it is a normal practice and working accounting practice for us to actually expense it in this way.
So when the comment is made that we're not saddling students with debt, you're suggesting that there's $34 billion of these student loans that are out there.
There's a stock of about 34 billion in terms of.
In your opinion,
loans.
would that not feel like a significant debt burden put onto this generation of students?
Well, it's again like the portion that is being written off is the non-performing.
Right.
The performing effectively is the bulk of all the loans, and given the fact that they are performing, like I can't comment on the policy and the calibration of the student loan program. That's beyond our remit. But all to say that it is a normal practice through the estimates and supply to have a certain write-off attributed to these.
So, and maybe you can or you can't comment on it, but it seems clear to me that this is an ongoing consideration that we have. What suggestions would the Treasury Board have in terms of adequately adjusting for, adequate supplies to post-secondary education that would perhaps mitigate this ongoing write-off?
Again, like that's a question about policy that it's a policy question that would probably be best addressed to our colleagues at ESDC.
Okay, so as it relates to Indigenous services, the question came up about the $588.3 million in funding under Vote 10B to fund child and family services. This funding was aimed to improve access and prevention to early intervention programs. My question is, what portion, to your knowledge, is being requested by services provided directly by First Nations?
That question, I don't have the answer to what proportion of the 588 is going directly to First Nations providers of that versus provincial versus agency. It's not, I don't think we have that information unless Ms. Santiago.
No, that's within the authority of the department and the minister.
And it's within the authority of the department and the minister.
Okay, well, I would suggest to you, being 45 minutes from the Six Nations and New Credit Territories, that the services that are being provided there are exemplary, and as it relates to, the experiences of the urban Indigenous and First Nations folks that we have in Hamilton, there are incredible programs and services that are being provided, but it often feels like, I'll share this on behalf of these communities, that sometimes, the funding is going to organizations or agencies or other levels that are kind of outside of the First Nations communities. And so I would, take this opportunity to strongly suggest that we get this information provided back to us so that there's a clear understanding of what that looks like in terms of direct funding to First Nations.
Could I just add just one point? Just on your initial question about student loans policy. So Budget 2016 did have a lot of information on that in terms of moving more towards grants as opposed to loans. So that's a useful resource and something for linking with ESDC colleagues.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the time.
We'll go to our second round, 5 minutes interventions each. Mr. McCauley, you're up.
Great. Thanks very much. First of all, Mr. Purvis, I realize we don't agree on a lot of things, but I have to take great offense at your comment about misrepresentation. If you look it up, the definition, it's, providing fake or false information. And I don't believe my comments about the use of Vote 10 ballooning from past years traditionally being $3 million a year is false or misrepresentation. I hope you were perhaps using that word wrong, but I want to get back to the vote 10 issue. It has been traditionally 3 million, 3 million, 3 million. You commented to, I think, my colleague, Mr. Bultave, about the use of it in, a crisis response. I want to go back to the last, world crisis we had financially, the 2008. The vote 10 then, I think, only went up to about $8 million. So again, no government, liberal, conservative, have used this in the past to the extent that it currently has been used this year and last year. The vote 5 money, which is contingency money, is where I would think such money should be coming from, not an inflated vote 10. So I will state again, I believe that if the government tries to bring forward a 200, 300 million, 380 million vote 10, in the estimates again for the coming year, I believe the opposition will look to reduce it to the traditional level as it has been used repeatedly of around the $3 million mark. I just want to get to the vote 5. There's money in vote 5 for almost $5 million for Rideau Hall Foundation. Now, vote 5, a quote, to provide for miscellaneous, urgent, or unforeseen expenditures not otherwise provided for. And I'm trying to figure out how Rideau Hall Foundation has been funded, I think, for the last 8 years by the government, or last 10 years. Just wondering, how is this $4.9 million therefore unforeseen, and how is it considered urgent? And again, this should be Heritage Canada. Heritage Canada reprofiled over that much, over $5 million. Maybe I should just ask Marshall.
Well, let me start by just saying that in terms of my comment about misrepresentation, if the word is strong, I don't know if there's a. My point was
the definition is lying. So yes, you stated
my point is in terms of the use of the vote, it has varied over the years, as you outlined. So I wasn't referring to that. It had to do more about references to the controls and the authorities and the oversight and the transparency related to the item.
There's no legally binding control specifying how that money will be spent once it has been authorized by Parliament. That's my concern, and I think that's my colleague's concern. And it goes back to the Vote 40 money, and it goes back to the Table A211 money about getting stuff approved by Parliament before we have actual plans. And I'm stating it was fine for the Liberals to push it past all of us in a majority government, but we will not allow that money to be pushed back parliamentarians without oversight or plans backing it up. Again,
it's about circumstances where if there's a payment that's required, a partial or full payment that's required, before the next Appropriation Act can be tabled. And when it's a horizontal initiative, a strategic horizontal initiative for government, that details on the initiative are provided just like any other initiative to parliamentarians. It comes with a Treasury Board authority. And then the use of it, the allocation from it, is disclosed very clearly for all parliamentarians as part of our online information. So again, I was referring more to those aspects only, and no offense.
Okay. The 4.9 for Rideau Hall.
The 4.9, so this is a circumstance where this item was not able to get into supplementary estimates A, and as a consequence, a payment is required for that.
It gets funded every year. How does it not? And why doesn't it come from Heritage?
It's a circumstance, Mr. McCall. It's just a circumstance where I'm giving you the context in which, if it was in supplementary estimates A, then it's funded. But it was not in supplementary estimates A. It was funded and now it's listed and it's frozen until such a point as it's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Drouin. You have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for staying with us today. Last year, and I'll continue on the pilot project that was done, but we were doing, there was 4 pillars essentially that we were trying to do a bit of an estimates reform, and one of them was obviously there was the estimates alignment, but the other pillars in terms of scope of accounting, and the minister briefly touched about it, accrual versus cash basis. And then the third vote, the vote structure and purpose-based voting. Can you elaborate on the vote structure and the purpose-based funding? And I think there was a pilot project was it Transportation Canada? And just wondering, how long are we going to pilot this? And is it working well? And just your thoughts on that.
Well, thank you for the question. You're correct. So there's many pillars and there's many aspects to estimates reform. The timing item that was discussed earlier is one of them. And then, of course, the cash and accrual alignment, the alignment between budget and estimates is a second one. In terms of the pilot-based votes or purpose-based votes, we did do a pilot with transport where we looked at the votes and broke it down according to its function. We didn't get a lot of feedback and a lot of interaction, frankly, on that in terms of whether there was considerable value added that was provided through that lens. The government did put a response out in terms of its response to the OGGO report from January, which did cite that and spoke to the question about whether this is one of the paths that we should continue with. I'd be always happy to, and the team would be very interested in understanding people's interests and views on that, of course, if they had strong views. But otherwise, we'll have to take into consideration whether to continue that pilot. Ultimately, you want to do a pilot like that if it has a lot of pickup and if people find considerable value and additional transparency involved with it. So,
and my second question has to do with the question of whether we should adapt as a whole of government for accrual accounting, and we know the chartered professionals, the CPAs always advise us. They've come here before committee, I believe multiple times over the past 10 years to give their opinion on that. We seem to see across the world and in private businesses, obviously, accrual accounting is the way to go. What seems to be the barriers for the government of Canada to adapt that and the challenges?
So, thank you very much. So we operate, when you think about the budget and you think about the fiscal forecasting and you think about the deficit, we operate on an accrual basis, right? But in terms of supply, in terms of the main estimates, these documents, we operate on a modified cash basis. So we effectively deal with cash with departments, and Parliament is charged with approving cash on a year-by-year basis. So, from that standpoint, we actually do operate on an accrual basis from a fiscal planning lens. But we have to reconcile back between that budget forecasting and where we're going there with respect to the operations side and ensuring that parliamentarians can see the cash that they are being asked to approve in terms of up to authorities. And that's, again, the point of the main estimates. It's the point of the appropriation bills as well.
And I know that there's a document that would reconcile, that would clearly show the reconciliation between the cash and the accrual accounting. That document was provided to us over the past 2 years. That will continue for over the next coming years.
So I think in terms of reconciliation, I can't comment on the budget. If you want, sure.
So what we had done after Budget 16, I believe, 2016, was we published a reconciliation from the budget into the estimates in the first supplementary estimates that was tabled after the budget. To the extent that we have supplementary estimates of some sort following a budget, we will continue that practice. What was started in 17 and sort of budget 18 and 19 was the practice of the budget showing some of its own reconciliation from the forecast into the cash forecast.
Thank you very much.
We believe that will continue. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We'll go to our final round of interventions, 2.5 minutes each. Madame Vignoli, I'm not sure if you have questions or not.
Of course.
Please, you have 2.5 minutes then, ma'am.
Merci.
Thank you. I want to come back to, well, actually, I'll go with the funds for Connected Canada. On the internet and the website, it states that Quebec has its own program under Connected Canada. There's an issue of transfers there as well. Now, looking at this fund, but does that include, is it included to decrease the amounts that Canadians have to pay to get connected, or is that money simply to give people access to internet and telephone services? Thank you very much for this question. Ms. Vignola. To be able to answer your question.
Ultimately, Connecting Canadians program is about ensuring that citizens in rural and remote and northern parts of the country can enjoy access to the commerce, the employment opportunities, and of course the distance education, and make the most of the digital economy. So the idea is for the Government of Canada to increase high-speed broadband coverage to provide at least 280,000 households in rural and remote regions of the country with high-speed broadband internet access so that they can make the most of the digital economy. I don't actually have the breakdown by region for that information.
Okay. Donc, c'est 280.
So the 280 families that were connected, if I understood correctly? That's right. 288,000. Okay. And that number includes transfers to Quebec also, or only for the rest of Canada? It's the transfers to, I believe, to the families to ensure that they can get connected to the internet.
Your final intervention with 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much. And if I can reflect on it, if I recall, I believe that my mother actually worked on Connecting Canadians for Industry Canada like way back in the 90s. And so I'm glad to see we're still on that. In your mandate letter, the Prime Minister asked you to help ensure that people of all gender identities, Indigenous peoples, racialized people, persons with disabilities, and minority groups are reflected in positions of leadership. In June 2019, this committee published a report entitled Improving the Federal Public Service Hiring Process, which noted that the Government of Canada should develop initiatives and programs to attract and hire more women in certain fields, such as STEM, more people with disabilities, more Indigenous people, and more members of visible minorities. Moreover, they should not be just hired at entry-level positions. What concrete actions do you plan to take to ensure that the number of women in certain fields and people with disabilities and Indigenous people and members of visible minorities increase in the public service, including in leadership positions?
Well, I can only comment, this is from the mandate letter for the President.
It is.
And probably more appropriate for the President to respond to this. I think one thing that could be helpful is for us to take that back and give a written response on behalf of the President for you on that.
Well, in your general assertion, do you tend to agree with the recommendations of the committee?
Well, again, like I think inclusivity, employment equity, of course, very important. But I'm an official here to answer questions just on supplementary estimates and the estimates process and the funding that is in here. There's a whole host of initiatives and data that exists, including the public sector employment surveys and so forth, that try to improve and build upon these very important and basic tenets that should be included. But I do think that perhaps in this instance, given it is part of the mandate letter and it is cited as a mandate letter issue for the president, that to give you a fulsome response, I could do.
Speak to,
and perhaps Baxter can jump in.
Just in terms of, sure. I think just in terms of transparency, the department is beginning to publish desegregated data by employment equity in its employment equity annual report coming out at the end of this fiscal year. And we've also put in place a central repository of active public service pools, accessible by managers and HR advisors, that can be filtered by group level and EE status. So that becomes a tool to enable and better understand.
Measure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to thank all of our witnesses, Madame Santiago, Madame Cahill, Mr. Purvis, and Mr. Williams, for being here once again. Your appearances are always pleasurable. Let me tell the rest of the colleagues I will suspend now. We've got about 15 minutes left that I'd like to deal with committee business. So once again, on behalf of the committee, to all our witnesses, thank you very much, and we are suspended.